Today on the podcast, Supreme Court goes after DOGE cuts. Hamas said they are going to ignore Trump's threats. Seems like a bad idea to me. And could Al Green face an expulsion vote? That and so much more. Thanks for listening. Daily Wire is reporting this. DOGE wiped out about $50 billion in USAID spending, reporting that money has not comported with American standards of foreign policy. Thus, a temporary federal freeze and impoundment was essential to put on those funds. Then a district court judge put a freeze on the freeze to allow that money to continue to go out the door. The constitutional issue involved is whether a district court judge has the capacity to simply shut down a presidential nationwide action. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court of the United States, in a 5-4 vote, essentially reprimanded the case back to the district court, saying they needed clarification as to why and how this is actually being done. 5 judges who voted in favor of doing so included 3 leftist judges, of course, Elena Kagan, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Sonia Sotomayor, and 2 conservatives or conservative-ish judges, John Roberts being one of them, and Annie Coney Barrett. It is unclear what the scope of the judgment is. The Supreme Court is reprimanding the case back to the district court to figure out exactly what must be paused. They basically pushed it back to the court, the lower court, because they wanted more clarification. This basically started because when Trump came into office, he let Elon Musk loose and told him, hey, let's start going after wasteful spending in these departments. Well, USAID has been a big target of them. This organization has wasted millions of American tax dollars, billions of American tax dollars, by sending money throughout the world for just foolish, unnecessary things. And we talked about it in the show yesterday how Trump listed a lot of those things in his speech before Congress earlier in the week. Just foolishness. Transgender studies, Sesame Street in one of the Arab countries, studies on transing mice, just a whole bunch of waste and abuse. So Trump through Elon Musk, has went after that USAID really harshly and is even, planning, at least hinted at the fact of shutting it down completely. Well, a district court judge, not long after Trump announced cuts to USAID, put a ruling. Now, this is not the Supreme Court, this is a district court judge in a local jurisdiction, did a ruling and basically halted that money from being wiped out from the USAID and stopping the president from making that cut. Well, it went all the way up to the Supreme Court and ended up getting up there Wednesday. Well, the 5-4 vote essentially said that the Supreme Court wanted more clarification on how this money was going to be cut. Now, this has been an issue with the president this term and the last term, where you'll have, and this happens even when a Democrat's in charge, you'll have the president come down with the executive order. He'll say, we're going to do this. And then you'll have some district court judge in D.C., in New York, anywhere, he or she will come down and say no, and will halt it and block it. And then there'll just be this internal battle, and then it'll end up going to the Supreme Court. So it's a constitutional crisis, really, in my mind. Can a local district court judge halt an executive order at the federal level in a jurisdiction that the president may have? Can he do that? It is unclear what the scope of the judgment that was passed by the Supreme Court is, are they saying the portion that has to go out is because the work hasn't been completed? So are they halting this money because it's already been allocated to certain things and just the work hasn't been completed? Or are they saying pausing federal spending at all is not allowable, right? Are they saying that the president is not allowed to pause it, period? It's really not clear. We'll kind of see in the coming weeks exactly what they meant by that. The decision brought a harsh dissent from Justice Samuel Alito, who's just been a great Supreme Court justice. Him and Clarence Thomas are just excellent. Usually Amy Cody Barrett is also excellent. She voted for this ruling, so it's kind of disappointing in that realm. But anyways, I want to read some of what Justice Samuel Alito had to say in his dissent, and kind of go through it because it's just really good. He just hits the nail on the head on this issue. Can the president halt federal spending? Can he cut spending for something or freeze it when it's already been allocated to a certain thing? That's what the debate really is. And can a federal judge, a district court judge, more specifically, block an executive order like this? So I'm going to read a little bit of that. Alito says, does a single district court judge who is likely lacks jurisdiction have the unchecked power to compel the government of the United States to pay out and probably lose forever $2 billion taxpayer dollars? The answer to the question should be an emphatic no, but a majority of this court apparently thinks otherwise. I am stunned. Alito continues, in capsule form, this is what happened. Respondents are a group of American businesses and nonprofits that receive foreign assistance funds from the State Department and the U.S. Agency for International Development. They brought suit and claimed that the current administration temporary pause of foreign assistance payments is unlawful. On February 13, 2025, the district court issued a temporary restraining order requiring the government to halt its funding. It based that decision on a finding that respondents are likely to succeed in showing that the government violated Administrative Procedure Act. After issuing the TRO, the district judge grew frustrated with the pace at which funds were being dispersed. And on February 25, he issued a second order requiring the government to pay out approximately $2 billion. The judge brushed aside the government's arguments that sovereign immunity bared this enforcement order, and he took two steps that, unless corrected, would prevent any higher court from reviewing and possibly stopping the payments. First, he labeled the order as non-appealable, TRO, and second, he demanded that the money be paid within 36 hours. This left the government with little time to try to obtain some review of what it regarded as lawless order. The government moved for a stay pending appeal in the district court. But the judge shrugged off the government's sovereign immunity argument and ignored the government's representation that most of the money in question, once dispersed, could probably not be recovered. Alito continued, to start, it is clear that the district court enforcement order should be construed as an appealable preliminary injunction, not as a mere TRO. A TRO, as its name suggests, is temporary. Its proper role is to restrain. Challenge conducted for a short time while the court considers whether more lasting relief is warranted. A temporary restraining order does not apply in this instance because it is not temporary. Once the money is gone, it's gone. A typical temporary restraining order could instruct not to engage in a particular action for a certain period of time, but a temporary restraining order cannot instruct one to pay a certain amount of money to a particular person, as that is not a temporary restraining order. Once the money has been paid, there is no clawing it back. And this is basically Alito's point, the summation of his point. That typically a TRO or a temporary restraining order just halts a specific action. It does not usually involve money. It does not usually involve holding money or forcing someone to pay money. According to Samuel Alito, was what this district court wanted to do was say, hey, you have to pay this money back. This money you're wanting to try to cut, you're going to have to pay it back. And this is unprecedented. It's not traditionally how TROs go. I'm not no law professor or lawyer, but it seems pretty simple that this kind of is abnormal. And besides that, it's to me it goes to a greater issue. Does the government need to work like this, to where you have a president who is within his jurisdiction cutting money in these departments that he oversees as the executive, and then a local district court judge turns around and says, no, you can't do that, and unilaterally cuts it and pauses it, does a restraining order in this case, and tells them they have to pay $2 billion back. Is that the way a government should be run? I think it's these judges, these random judges, and like I said, it's been going on for years now in different administrations. I think it just gives them too much power, where they can just unilaterally just stop something. We saw this all the way back with voter ID, where the state of North Carolina passed a voter ID law. A sovereign state passed a voter ID law requiring you to show your ID when you vote, and a federal judge says, nope, unconstitutional, bam, block. That doesn't seem right to me. If you have a problem with a law that a state proposes, or that a president or a legislative passes, then it needs to go to the Supreme Court. It needs to work its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they decide. That's the way it's supposed to work. But these random judges getting involved and then saying, no, we're going to block this, I'm going to block this, unilaterally, by themselves, just doesn't seem like a good way for government to work to me. And we've seen this go on multiple times under multiple administrations. It happened a lot under Trump, especially in this term, because Trump's been very aggressive in his first month and a half, 2 months. He's signed a lot of executive orders. There's more to come, more action to come. I just don't think this is a good way to run government. You have a problem with an executive order the president's passed, sue, get it to the Supreme Court, let the Supreme Court decide. It's just the way it got to the Supreme Court this time doesn't seem like it's fair. And the fact that this has been going on for years now with multiple issues, state and federal issues, and having just one federal judge by him and her or herself shutting down a piece of legislation or a executive order that falls under the president's jurisdiction doesn't seem like a good way to run things. So it raises the question to me, why did Justice Roberts and Justice Coney Barrett, why did they vote for this? It's not an extreme order, okay, by the president. To cut wasteful spending in an area that's in a agency that is where waste is clearly obvious. I mean, it's clear the amount of waste, especially has went on in the USAID. It's pretty obvious. I don't understand what they were thinking. But I mean, as Justice Alito said, if the effect of the order is to force the federal government to spend funds it can't get back before the adjudication at the Supreme Court level, then that's a massive problem, right? If a district court judge, federal judge says, hey, you need to disperse these funds. You can't block them, Mr. President. Well, by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, because of this judge forcing the president to disperse them, by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, like it should under most issues like this, the money will be gone. Of course it'll be gone. Now, we were expecting this type of stuff under the second term of the president, President Trump. He's moving fast. The left hates him more than ever, right? So we expected this, and there's going to be more of this to come, of course, as the president signs more executive orders, and when we start getting into legislation that is ramping up now, which puts things more in concrete, executive order is only temporary because another president can change it. That's the problem with them. Well, as we start getting into legislation from the Republicans in the House and Senate, we start getting Trump signing these bills and we start getting things into law, into concrete law, we're probably going to see more of this kind of stuff. But I have a problem with this, and I've always had a problem with this. Even when it happens when the you have a Democrat president, I don't see how it's okay for a federal judge in some district court in the country, in Houston or New York or city or somewhere out west, just to be like, nope, can't do that, and shut something down. I don't understand that, and it doesn't make sense to me. Be interesting to see where this goes, because Trump has ignored some of these in the past, even since he's in his second term, ignored these rulings from these district court judges. And then the left, loses their minds, and mainstream media is like, oh man, it's a constitutional crisis. It's the end of the world. I think it was reversed. They wouldn't be like that, of course. If there was a Democrat president and he signed some executive order, of course they would not be saying what they're saying. And I'm just trying to be fair on whether it's a Democrat or Republican. It just doesn't make sense to me. I'll just say that. It just doesn't make sense to me. So in other news, after Trump threatened Hamas is now refusing to release more hostages without Phase 2 ceasefire deal. This is Fox News reporting. Hamas terror group on Thursday dismissed President Donald Trump's latest threat and refused to release more Israeli hostages without a permanent ceasefire deal in the Gaza Strip. Hamas spokesperson, which I'm not going to try to pronounce their name, said that the best path to free and remaining Israel hostages is through negotiations on the second phase of ceasefire agreement. The first ceasefire phase, which lasted 42 days, ended on Saturday, so last week. A second phase was supposed to begin in early February, though only limited preparatory talks has been held so far. So Hamas' response comes after Trump met with 8 former hostages in Washington and posted what he called a last warning to Hamas on Truth Social platform on Wednesday. He stated, "Shalom Hamas," means hello and goodbye. You can choose, the president post began. Release all the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it's over for you, he said. Pretty strong words from the president. I think there's a lot of things that kind of led this. First of all, Hamas, they're a terrorist organization. They're going to take advantage of any deal, any way they can. They started releasing some hostages in phase 1 of this ceasefire. And these people, man, they look like death. The ones that were alive, of course, even look like death. They look like the president's even said they look like they came out of a concentration camp. They're all shriveled up, pale. They were not taking care of these people. They weren't. These are animals, barbarians. And I think all these hostages being released, what little they did release, looking as terrible as they did, just made Hamas look terrible. And they've kind of upped the ante. And the president's kind of over it, President Trump. And he added in his statement that he will be sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job, and that not a single Hamas member will be safe if you don't do as I say. So the president's up in the ante. He's wanting to get this over with and get these hostages released. Now, the amount of hostages still alive is you get varying reports. Hamas has released some of those hostages in the first phase. Not many. I don't know the exact number, but it wasn't much. They did release some bodies as well. There are different reports about how many hostages are still alive in Gaza. One report has it about 24 that are still living. And there's approximately 34-ish bodies that still need to be released. It's said that Hamas still has bodies and or at least remains left of the 2014 war that Hamas had with Israel. Here's the bottom line. Hamas started this war. You are crazy if you don't think that. They attacked Israel on October 7th, 2023. Israel would not be in Gaza if it weren't for that attack. Bottom line. So any amount of death that has occurred is because of them. Hamas has said that there's up to 48,000 Palestinians that have died. You can't trust a word that these people have said. You can't. Their health ministry said that 48,000 Palestinians died, mostly women and children. So two things say that if that's true, which I highly doubt it because they've been caught lying time and time again with these estimations. But if that's true, who's to blame for that? Is it the Israelis who have time and time again done everything they can to try to limit the amount of deaths in this war? Because Israel has air superiority, okay? Israel, all they'd have to do to end this was just drop a bunch of bombs. They have complete air superiority. The hostages, what little will get released, are going to either be very few or just be bodies. So if they wanted to end the war, they could just bomb the crap out of Gaza. But they have done everything they can in an urban environment to protect women and children and civilians, which is very hard in an urban environment. But second of all, we know for a fact that Hamas has used civilians, women and children, hospitals and schools as shields. They have used hospitals and schools and areas where civilians gather as places to store ammo, as outposts. They have done this on purpose in order to do two things: slow Israel down and up civilian casualties. So they can, when Israel comes in and destroys a school or a hospital and raids it where all the weapons and ammo and munitions are being stored, or where they're hiding, and when Israel comes in there, they can then take their cameras and show how Israel is trying to kill civilians in a hospital, or Israel bombed this piece of property, but it had a bunch of civilians on it. That's what this is, okay? So even if their estimates are true, which they're not, they've been caught lying time and time again, but if they're true, there is no one to blame but Hamas. They started this. I don't understand how you can't see that. There's many on the left that cannot see that. At least say they can't. I don't know how you can't. Okay? It's just about as unreasonable as the two-state solution argument, where many Democrats have argued that we need a two-state solution where Israel and Hamas, or Israel and Palestine, or Palestinians lives in separate countries side by side. You cannot reason with someone. You cannot live peacefully beside someone who believes you shouldn't exist. Bottom line, you can't. If Hamas was to lay down its arms today, Israel would go in there, arrest them, there'd be no more killing. If Israel laid down every one of its arms and surrendered, Hamas would wipe them off the planet and kill every one of them. You know they would. There's no moral equivalence here. Okay? They're not the same. The cultures are not the same. Their cultures are not equal. One side is grown and raised from birth to hate the other with a passion. And I'm not saying Israel's perfect, but they have much more diversity in their country. They have, I think it's 20% of their population is Muslim. Israeli citizens who are Muslim. It's generally a more liberal country. It's just not the same. Their cultures are not equal. So at some point, and us as the U.S. who have been funding Israel, you just got to say, oh, that's enough. That's enough of enough. Because you can't trust these people. They don't want to release all the hostages. They're to blame for the start of this war in the first place. So let's go after them. Let's finish the job. That's kind of Trump's mindset. Release them now, or we're going to give Israel everything they need, and they're going to finish the job. They're going to wipe you off the planet. I'm good with it. Sounds good to me. In other news, Daily Wire is reporting, could Al Green face an expulsion vote? One GOP lawmaker believes that that's a reasonable consideration. Representative Al Green, a Democrat from Texas, from the Houston area, who has now been censored for heckling President Donald Trump during his address to a joint session of Congress on Tuesday night, might face more punitive measures from the House Republicans fed up with his antics. Daily Caller News Foundation reporter Miles Morrill posted a video on X on Thursday showing Representative Tim Burchett being asked whether he thinks Republicans should take a step further and potentially bring a vote to expel Green. Now, expulsion means to remove him, okay? Remove him from his assignment in the House. And this is what Representative Burchett had to say.
Do you think Republicans should take a step further and potentially bring a vote to expel Al Green?
Yeah, I think that would be a reasonable consideration, because I think that's we're going to have to do something to combat this craziness that's going on, and at some point we got to restore it. Might be that sacrificial lamb.
I agree with this. At some point, you just got to bring back some decorum. So, expulsion from the House requires a 2/3 majority vote to succeed, and has only happened a handful of times throughout U.S. history. 2 expelled members were convicted of crimes, while 3 others were kicked out in 1861 for back in the Confederacy, before right during the Civil War. Most recent vote took place in late 2023. If you remember, Representative George Santos from New York, he had faced multiple federal charges and pleaded guilty for those charges: identity theft, wire fraud charges. Yes, it seems like with the slim majority that the Republicans have, it's very unlikely. But pushing for it and bringing it up and having the Democrats vote against it is a good thing. I think that the majority of Americans watching the speech Tuesday night would agree that Representative Al Green and the rest of the Democratic antics that occurred that night were uncalled for. I think there's polling to show that. I think it was some 78% of Americans, it was a CBS poll, approved of the president's speech. And that's all the Republicans and the majority of the independents. Okay, you can't win when you have 78% of Americans agreeing on something. Okay? That doesn't mean 78% of Americans agreed everything that was said in the speech, but as a whole, the majority of Americans approved of it. And then when you have someone like Representative Al Green coming out and making a fool of himself, hollering and heckling at the president, which is disrespectful, even if you believe the president's wrong. And man, listening to Joe Biden for years and listening to Barack Obama for years, there are plenty of times where, don't you know, someone wanted to holler and yell. And it happened a couple times, and those people were criticized by the Democrats and by the media. In 2009, I believe it was, when the president was giving a State of the Union address, and Congressman Joe Wilson got up and hollered. I don't think he stood up. I think he was just standing there. He just lost his cool and hollered at the president and said, "You lie." And the media lost their minds. They were ready to remove him from office, remove him from the House. They were ready to censor him. They called him a racist just because he lost his cool in that moment and hollered at the president, and did not make a big a spectacle as Al Green did. The hypocrisy here. Does anybody not see that? The hypocrisy is insane. The bottom line is, this kind of activity does not need to happen. You can disagree with the president, and that's fine. You're wrong on the majority of those issues, but you can do that. But getting up and hollering and waving your cane and being a disruption like that is just wrong. So I think they should bring up this vote to censor, or they already censored him, but to remove him from office through expulsion. That's fine. It won't pass, of course, not with the slim majority, like I said, that they have. But it needs to happen. It's not becoming of a congressman to act like this. It's just not. It's not right. And at some point, we got to bring some decorum back, bring some civility back to these type of speeches and these type of events, and not have one side of the aisle turning it into a circus. At some point, we just got to bring that back. So good for the Republicans for pushing this. Will it happen? Will it pass? Probably not, but will at least a vote happen? I'm not sure. We'll see what happens. So in other news, CNN is reporting Trump tells cabinet members they're in charge of staffing. Business leaders and Republicans complain about Musk. 1 week after Elon Musk held court before the cameras during President Donald Trump's first cabinet meeting, many of the confirmed leaders of the government departments and agencies reconvened in the cabinet room on Thursday for a different kind of discussion. During a nearly 90-minute meeting, this time without any cameras, Trump delivered a clear message as Musk, one of his most influential members of his administration, sat nearby. The president told his agency's heads that while Musk's effort to slash the size and spending of the federal government has his full support, they are the ones, not Musk, who are in charge of staffing their respective agencies. Keep all the people you want, everybody that you need, Trump told his cabinet, as recounted to reporters later in the Oval Office. I want them to do the best job they can, the president said. That's very important, and we want them to keep the good people. The meeting on Thursday, which Trump said would be repeated every 2 weeks, was among the first examples of the president's acting to rein in Elon Musk. This is according to CNN, instead of a proverbial chainsaw, which Musk had held up during a high-profile appearance last month. Trump said the administration would be wielding a scalpel to make cuts going forward. Yes, it has this appearance that Elon Musk has went in and unilaterally brought all these job cuts to these different cabinets, to these different agencies and these different departments within the government. I think the bottom line is Trump's always been in charge. The news media has tried to make it sound like Elon Musk has been acting on his own and has been making all these huge cuts without the president knowing, without any oversight at all. I just think that's absurd. Trump wants to win. Trump's not going to let him cut things and remove things that in any way hurt his administration, okay? So I don't know if this is necessarily a change of pace, but just Trump just being clear with his cabinet. Hey, you guys are in charge of your departments. You guys are, not Elon Musk. I think that was already clear. Like I said, I think obviously Elon Musk from day one has been purely advisory. So he's went in and just advised the president on things, and this idea that he was on his own bringing cuts without Trump knowing or Trump having the final say is just absurd. Trump's clarified that multiple times. All this is just an attempt to discredit DOGE, discredit the president, discredit Elon Musk because of what they're doing, because of the bureaucracy they're cutting, whether it's spending or personnel. This idea that you can be a government worker, that you're unfireable, or that your position has to stay in place that you have, and that administration cannot come in and cut your job to save money. They have no right to do that. How absurd. How absurd. It's just absurd to me. One of the news outlets, mainstream media, ran a story how, Trump had cut some veteran affairs personnel, the Veterans Affairs Administration, and some veterans lost their jobs. I'm sorry, I don't care who you are. This idea that you deserve a federal job and you have a right to a federal job is just absurd to me. It's absurd to me. You do not have a right to a federal job, and the country does not have a right to hold a specific position. If it's unnecessary and we can cut it, let's cut it. Now, and when it comes to the veterans that may lose their jobs, some of them who may have other government jobs after leaving the military, sure, if the president wants to find a way to get them other jobs in the private sector, that sounds like a good idea to me. But it's just the attitude by some on the left and even some government employees that I'm entitled to a government job. No, you're not. If we can find that your position, whatever your task is not necessary, and we can do without it, let's cut it. You're not entitled to it. You can go find another job. And with a strong resume, you shouldn't have an issue with that. It's the wrong attitude. So that's all we have today, folks. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe. Please continue to support us. Like us on Facebook. We got a Facebook page up and running. Thanks for being here. Bye.